I've learned more from failures than I have from successes. No battle plan survives the first confrontation with the enemy. Persistence is absolutely key. The longer you're in the arena, the more chances for success you have.
Welcome back to the Breakout CEO, everybody. I'm your host, Jeff Holman. So glad to have you here joining us again, learning about how successful and smart people think, how CEOs make pivotal decisions. And today, to help us with that, I've got John Cousins with me. John, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. You've got quite the background. It spans quite a few different things and we're not going to get into everything right this minute, but I'm sure some of it will come up as we're talking, but you've done IPO stuff, you've done hedge fund stuff, you've done bigger stuff, you've done smaller stuff. I think you've had some wins and maybe seen a few non-wins, we'll call them. And, all of that is, as we talked in our quick Q&A segment before this, those are part of life's journey, right?
Oh, absolutely. I've heard that nowadays, it used to be that you could basically come out of high school, get a job maybe at the manufacturing plant, get your lunch pail, work for 40 years and, retire. There was this sort of patriarchy type of idea about industry and companies that they would actually take care of their employees for the whole time. It's not that way anymore. They say on average, everybody has about 9 careers, 9 different careers these days, because you have to, like a cat, keep landing on your feet as things change. Kodak goes away as a business. Oh my gosh, what do you do up in Rochester, New York? You have to figure it out or move. And so, I've done a lot, and it's only in retrospect, I mean, obviously, that I can sort of can connect the little dots, that's sort of a thread, because otherwise it seems like I'm just bouncing around like a ping pong ball, doing this, doing that. But they all seem to have a piece, and come together on some sort of a path, which is really and gotten me to a place that I really, really feel happy and satisfied, which I feel blessed for that. It's
Oh,
like,
good.
so
Not everybody reaches that moment very quickly sometimes, or maybe ever at all. So it's good you've gotten to that point. So you've seen, IPOs, you've seen legendary investments, you've seen, I think, what you called an epic failure at one point. But which of these and now you're doing your solopreneur stuff. Which of these experiences would you say has changed how you think as a CEO the most?
Well, that's a great question, Jeff. I think they all, in some way, everything adds to, if we're attuned to sort of try to look for the lessons in whatever we do, the lessons are there. But I would say, a lot of, I think I've learned more from failures than I have from successes. And I've heard a lot of people say that, it's like when you have successes, especially early on in life, you can see people in their 20s and all of a sudden, they melt down because they think that they're a genius all of a sudden. They start believing the hype around them, the sycophantry that sort of gets around them. And I'm grateful that I wasn't successful early on in a way. And so I had to keep questioning, what am I doing wrong? What do I want to do? What do I want to be? And when you start to ask those kind of deeper questions and look for the answers, that's when you really start to grow. So I think there's a lot of when you have an idea and it's a vision, and now you're going to turn that vision into some sort of reality. If it goes perfectly or better than the experience, and I've had lots of those, a number of those, then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm got the golden touch. I'm a genius. I can do anything wrong, and that is a recipe for epic fail. Really, really fail, or not even knowing yourself. But if things don't go the way that you think, like they say, no von Moltke, who was a Prussian general, said, no battle plan survives the first confrontation with the enemy. You have your plan, and as soon as it goes against reality, things don't just go the way that you think they're going to go, and you have to think on your feet. The obstacle is the way. That great book and idea. That it's the obstacles, that those are the ways that we learn, and those lessons are the ones that, if you can figure out a way to make them repeatable, can really help you on the path, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's been for me.
I think it's a Mike Tyson quote. It's said to be a Mike Tyson quote, right?
Punched in the face.
Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's his take on the von Moltke. Yeah, and I've always, and it is, yeah, a Mike Tyson quote, and and he's absolutely right. You get in the ring and it's always it's once you're testing your ideas, and I think that's where it gets courageous and brave as an entrepreneur or a leader,
Yeah.
um, is when you're actually going to be willing to test your ideas against reality and realize that reality does not conform to your will. You're
Yeah.
going to have to figure out ways to make it work.
Yeah, no, I was actually talking to my cousin, not my cousin, talking to my nephew, my brother's son. He's early 20s, Chance, great kid. Studying engineering, doing this stuff, but he teaches at a boxing gym right now. And he was just telling me last night he's like a coach at the gym, but he's actually started sparring and being in the gym. He hasn't boxed. He hasn't grown up boxing. So he's teaching people kind of the mechanics, but he had never done it until more recently. And he said, "Man, I go in there, they put me with this guy named Danny. He's been boxing since he was 8, and I just keep getting punched in the face over and over and over and over." But now I go back and I'm coaching my class and I'm like, "No, like, I actually know what it's like to be punched in the face." Like, so I'm up there. You wanna get ready for fighting, I'm gonna, get my pool noodle or whatever, and while you're punching the bag, I'm gonna whack you in the face as hard as I can, and you're gonna be ready for when you start sparring. It's totally different once you've been in the ring, so to speak.
Absolutely. There's that great, and I can't quote it now, but Teddy Roosevelt thing about the person that's in
The
the
man in the
critic
arena, right?
and the man in the arena. Yeah, and I always love that. That is like the kind of thing. The critics just sit there and do their thing, but it's the person that's actually down there, bleeding and sweating and working and toiling. That's where it's at. And so yeah, that's just a great way to think about it. And the other thing
Yeah,
about, let's say, boxing or anything is, it's all about also, if you get knocked down 8 times, you get up nine
get up
times.
9, yep.
It's really, you know,
Yeah,
keep
persistence is
going.
key.
Persistence is absolutely key. And I found for me, persistence, I'm I don't have to worry about persistence if I'm doing something that for some reason has a pull to me. I love it for whatever reason. They say to follow your passion, and that can be erroneous because maybe there's not a market for your passion. But figuring out those Venn diagrams overlap. But if you're doing something that you really love or enjoy and love the process of, and the progress, whatever it is, then it's easy to just keep going, even if all you get for a while are crickets and, no one's paying attention. You just keep going and going. And, over time, there's a good possibility that, especially in this day and age when you can build up audiences of a long tail, all over the world, if there's just a couple of people in every market, you don't have to worry about your geography, being popular in one place. That can really be super helpful. And so persistence by itself, I think, just like discipline, habits are better than discipline. Love of doing something in the process is better than persistence, I think, persistence is just an artifact of that.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to explore a little bit more depth about, where you were in which arena you were in, right? I don't know if that's a specific business or time of life, but where were you when you think back and you say to yourself, "You know what? That might have been one of the hardest times, but I was in the arena. I showed up and I actually learned to break through, the barriers that were in front of me at that point." Where was one of your biggest breakthroughs in your career?
Well, let's see. I've had a lot of, you know, low points, and I think after a while, if you have some success or if you have some sort of experience of, if you do it long enough, something happens. Like that, like I've heard, I don't have faith, I have experience. That things happen, and then you just keep with it. I think that's a really important thing. But let's see, y- you know, I had a couple of. One was, say an epic fail. I had a company. I had, heard these guys talk about what they were doing, and they were doing something really, really neat. But they had one customer. They had one customer. It was a government agency, and so I contacted these guys and say, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you take that knowledge base and stuff, and we make it into an app and sell it to the general public?" And it seemed like a great idea. And so I started this.
What was the context? So what kind of business was this?
Well, it was a a food safety company, and what they were doing was they did open source intelligence. They were looking at, OSINT all around the world. They had this one brilliant guy who is, ex-military and, NSA, and just a genius at, looking and reviewing, information all over the world. Open source means that it's totally available, so newspapers, radio shows, whatever, and he had this whole team in all different languages that were looking at, where food was coming into the United States. And we have a lot of food that gets imported in the United States. Obviously, if you go and you get grapes in the middle of winter or something, they're not grown down the block. They're from Uruguay or Thailand or all these kind of places. And the only thing that they tell us about the food on the shelves, if you go, is country of origin. They don't tell us anything about safety standards, anything like that. And so there's all kinds of things that are in your food that we don't really know about. Like, if you get shrimp that are aqua farmed, say from some country that doesn't have the same type of things that we safety standards that we do, they get put all kinds of antibiotics, hormones, all kinds, and it's relatively not good for you to eat those kind of things, or tilapia or something like that, or apples from China where the ground is polluted with heavy metals, things like that. And they would look at all these kind of things, and we'd had this rating system, and their customer was the FDA, and the FDA has to examine a bunch of stuff coming into the different ports, and it only gets to examine about 5% of what comes in. It's just such a flood of stuff. They made it so that they had 10 times better results at catching bad, imported food than before, because they could use this information to target what's coming into what ports and stuff like that.
From your
So turn
information that you guys had
fr
developed.
from the information that these guys were developing. And so
Got
what
it.
we were gonna do is take that same database, that same kind of stuff, and make it an app, a subscription app. You'd buy this thing, it's called Food Sentry, and you'd go in and you'd use a barcode thing to read it, and it would tell you about what is this is the tomatoes from Mexico better than the tomatoes from Uruguay or whatever, and you could make those kind of decisions. Um and so we were doing that. We had a team. I had an incredible marketing guy that came on because he was really inspired by what we were doing, and he wanted to join. So he joined. I split up the equity 5 ways basically to make it like, 3 musketeers, 5 musketeers, all equal, da 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 da. And I had all the equity. I did this as a generous kind of thing, I thought at that time.
Mhm.
And they ended up ousting me
Oh,
after,
you
and
you
the
gave
thing
up
tanked.
enough that you didn't have control, and so
I didn't have control, and what happened was, we were having a difficult time. It turned out that, I thought, "Oh, everybody's gonna love, having safe food and stuff like that." Turned out people don't really give that much, of a hoot, not that many. People eat at McDonald's, they eat it, whatever. They don't really care if their food has a bunch of sodium, or where their beef comes from, or what. Um, and so we realized, so then we started moving into having supply chain management for different companies that didn't know where their supplies were really coming from, and we could vet those. But then it became, instead of becoming a, a, uh, a downloadable digital first company that could really scale, it became more like a consulting firm where every client, again, big clients, it would be a different kind of set of criteria, and so it wouldn't really scale. And I kind of lost interest, and but then I got booted out, and it was just a miserable experience for me, to just sort of, I remember my wife said when I came home, I was just like white, I just like, and I couldn't believe it. I put all this time and effort into it, made this thing, and then, I relinquished control thinking that that would be a good venture, and it turned out not to be. And so lessons learned, but, that was when I, really, really, and that's when I basically started to think about, what, having partners, having big customers, those kind of things, or having investors. I had that before where, they just want to bleed you dry sometimes and stuff, and not really have your best interest in mind. Basically, a lot of times, VCs and stuff, all they want to do is give you milestones that you commit to that you can't perform on, so that then they can grab more equity as part of the, once you get to that milestone, and don't actually, have the deliverables at that time until they have control of your company.
yeah,
So,
yeah, there may be some of that, maybe less optimistic or more nefarious activity going on. Well, when you were at Food Century, I mean, how did you guys make the decision to pivot from the app to the to the consulting, country of origin type of work? I mean, clearly the market was giving you signals and saying,
Yep.
"We're not buying, we're not, we're not getting traction or whatever." But that doesn't mean, you know, signals are one thing, but making the decision and the process of talking it through with the team and getting everybody on board or getting enough people on board, like what was that process like for you guys to work through that decision together as a team of 5 musketeers?
Well, that's another great question. Basically, I had 2 guys that were really, really pivotal and their expertise was outstanding. One was the open source intelligent guy, absolutely brilliant, military. He had a certain kind of mindset though, that was very regimented and then the marketing guy, a genius marketing guy who had done all kinds of great campaigns before. And, uh and he was more of a liberal, artsy kind of guy, right? So these 2 guys didn't really mesh as far as their personalities, and I was kind of the guy in between, talk about a leadership thing,
Yeah.
trying to hold this thing together long enough for a big payday. I mean,
Oh, was
basically is
was
what I
there
was
was there
trying to do.
contention or, I
There
mean,
was, there
okay,
was. They just didn't like each other's way of looking at the world and approaching the world.
I see.
Not the business, and so you know, the marketing guy would say, "Here's what the market wants," you know, and the operations guy would say, "Here's what we can deliver." And they would just butt heads, and finally, the marketing guy said, "Life's too short. I'm out of here." And he left. And when he left, then we had to figure out, okay, what are we gonna do? We had been approached by a couple of large international companies to do, the other way. So, we tried that, and that's when it basically the business model changed enough that it didn't really make sense to me, but then a decision was made for me as far as, my involvement. But, I basically followed, the marketing guy out the door, and then the thing never really took off. So that was just a challenging time, but it really made me have to go back and say, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Obviously, I couldn't sort of be the marriage counselor or whatever between these 2 guys to keep them, in their own spheres. So that was really, that's how it really it basically was just, that precipitated looking in another direction, and the direction presented itself from some inquiries from some big companies.
Okay. Well, I'd love to get into some of what came next, but first, I mean, I just wanna touch on the point that you're making that, a lot of leaders get themselves into that situation or find themselves in that situation, right? Where you know that there's going to be tension among the different roles in the leadership team and company. They have different tasks they're trying to complete, maybe all aligned to a similar strategic objective, but their tasks and their way of thinking are different. And so, at what point did you realize this we might not be able to solve this communication issue between these two? Because as a leader, you're like I can see both sides. I'm sure you're sitting there saying, we're saying the same thing in different languages. Let me translate. Let's just get on the same page and then we can get past this squabbling that's keeping us from doing the real work, right? At what point did you realize, "I don't know if I can save this communication issue?"
When the marketing guy said, "I'm out of here." I mean, basically, up until then, I thought, "Oh, I'm gonna," like I said, "I'm gonna do everything I can to hold this together." I mean, it was basically make stand up, spin up a startup, and then try to sell it to some bigger company and make an exit, relatively fast, couple years. And if I could just keep it together long enough, keep these guys, from killing each other, then we can make this happen. Another thing like that too that's really tough is when you have a bunch of different, and every company has a bunch of different aspects, and especially when you're in a growth stage, um, each part doesn't have the identical or equitable amount of work. At some point, one group's gonna have to really be doing a bunch of heavy lifting while the other group looks a little bit passive. And then if you get to the right spot in the curve or whatever of growth, then the other group's gonna come in and do their part. And you have to be comfortable with that kind of fluidity. And that's sort of another tough thing to do. People say, "We're working 18 times as hard as those guys over there. They don't do crap. They don't know what they're doing." And also, I think a lot of sides don't appreciate the other side, you know? a lot of people think marketing, pff, marketing is, what do they do? It's just so soft and, stuff like that. They do a couple of, things and I'm the one that's really doing the big lifting and all, I'm making the product, I make the product and people are going to come and buy it. Right. What I found out through especially now as a solopreneur, is making the products is, is tough. No question. And really trying to find product market fit, and finding customers and all. But then I think marketing is actually much more difficult. It's really, really hard. And especially, I mean, it's better now in this day and age when we have all these incredible tools so we can actually get feedback on our marketing. John Wanamaker, who was one of the famous first department store guys, said, half of my budget, my advertising budget is misspent. The problem is I don't know which half, and that's the thing, now you can actually get feedback on what ads are working, how they're, how what kind of engagement, you can re-engage people, you can do all kinds of stuff to get metrics and feedback and see what's working and double down on that, and what's not working, either jettison or refine it until it is working. So marketing has gotten a lot, I think, more engineering like and more feedback. I mean, in the old days, how did you do it? You ran an ad in a magazine, say, it would take you, you'd go do the whole ad, it'd be the nice glossy ad, the magazine would come out 60 days later, it would be on the newsstands, and then, and how did you measure the efficacy of that advertising campaign? Very difficult, where now you can just, like, you put something up, you get the Google results, and you just, go from there, and so it's much more quantitative, but even with that, it's incredible. I find it to be incredibly difficult to get the messaging right and to, get the conversions up to a place that makes sense and all those kind of, good things that we can do now.
Yeah, and now you're filling multiple hats, wearing multiple hats here at this new place. What did you find that shifted in your, the way you thought about things? In addition to saying, "Huh, I don't know that I want all this controversy or have all this drama around me. I'm gonna work with, do something a little bit more, solopreneur-ish." How else did your thinking change?
Well, one of the things I couldn't be a solopreneur 20 years ago or 15 years ago. It's all with these new platforms and a lot of automation and things that allow us to now do a lot of the things that used to take people. We can do it with automation. You can make say an advertising campaign that grabs emails, and then you make an email funnel, and then that goes to your paywall, and then you measure conversions, and nobody has to do anything. That's just all automated. And then if it's digital downloads, as many people as want them can download it, and so you don't have working capital tied up in accounts receivable or inventory, and so all those kind of things really help. Um, and and there was something I was going to. Oh, and yeah, as a leader, and as one of the big things you're supposed to do is delegate, and really be comfortable and delegate, and I agree with that to a point. But what I found is whenever I delegate and whenever I've delegated, my understanding of that part of the business starts to atrophy because I'm not directly involved in it. So all of a sudden I would get to places where it's like, wait a minute, I don't really know what's going on over here in this part or that part. And now and plus I just love doing every part of it. I really I love to geek out on marketing and operations and, accounting and finance and everything in between. So, it's not a problem. I actually feel better. And I actually, if I'm more engaged with every part, then I know actually what's happening. And I find that to be absolutely crucial. Um, and so it's a balance to, people don't delegate. They hold things because they can do it faster than handing it off to someone else until that person really gets up to speed, and if you do that too much, then you're really, diluting your efforts because you can't do everything that well. But I do delegate, but I delegate to automation. It's like that 4-hour work week book. I think that was a revelatory thing for me, quite frankly, that Tim Ferriss, Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, when that came out. I mean, the name's kind of, uh, wild, but it was all about, how can you, what do you need to have done? The other things, just get rid of them or automate them, away. And I was like, wow, we're at a place now where we can actually do that. And so that was back when I really started to think about delegating, but delegating to automation where I could see, a dashboard of what's going on and know that the automation doesn't have any, ulterior motives. It's tough with employees too, and I don't mean to be so cynical about, partners and employees and investors and all that kind of stuff because they can be wonderful too, and they can be empowering.
But this is the real part of the business though, right? Anytime you're building a business at scale that requires people, and let's face it, automation is awesome, but most businesses require some people still, right? Maybe many people, and you have to manage the team of people and the team of emotions and the drama, or like, it's part of the business, and it's a very real part that can, I think, maybe from your food century example, it can really have an impact on the viability of the business outside of the business model itself, right?
Well, absolutely. There's been the whole thing like quiet quitting, that whole thing. I mean, and basically the whole idea, nobody hires anybody unless they are creating surplus value, more value than they're getting paid for. There's no reason to have an employee if they're not creating more value than they're getting paid for, and then that excess value, that surplus value, accrues up to the owners of the company. So every employee, to a degree, is being exploited. Um, and so people also, as they're working, sometimes get tired of it and stuff, and it gets to that point of, I'm going to pay you just enough that you don't quit, and you're gonna do just enough work that you don't fire me. And that's a real dysfunctional place to be in a company. I've seen that happen a lot too, where companies just don't it's like molasses, this bureaucracy gets built up because people are just doing enough and not doing what, they want. And what you're saying, Jeff, too, about, businesses need people now. Well, we're right on the cusp of, dare I say the A word, AI, artificial intelligence, where a lot of, especially the first ones are coming for all the white collar jobs. I mean, anything that has to be done that can be done by, moving around, documents and information is just prime for AI to take over and do that job. I mean, automation is just to that point. When I say automation, I mean a lot of times, artificial automation with AI sprinkled on it and stuff, and actually moving atoms, actually making things on a manufacturing floor, that's going to take some more time maybe, but we're getting, Tesla just announced that they are dropping their Model S and their Model Y cars, and they're going to use that factory space to start manufacturing their Optimus robots, their humanoid robots. Those are coming pretty quick, and when that happens, you know, a lot of jobs that are actually, um, you know, plumbers and carpenters and everything else, we're actually moving things around. Warehouse jobs and stuff are going to be done by robots, and I think that those days are coming a lot faster than we think. I keep hearing these pundits talk about, by 2027, things like that. That these are, a couple of years, these things are going to be happening. So I think positioning myself as a solopreneur is just a way that I can maybe leverage some of these. The tools are just, coming on fast and furious too. They're always changing and getting smarter and being more capable. So that's been a real plus, I think. And I don't know if businesses are going to survive in our 20th century kind of model where we have a whole bunch of layers of management and a whole bunch of people doing different tasks. And I mean, when all those tasks can be automated, um, I think those jobs are going to, evaporate.
Yeah, no. Well, I wanna get into what you're working on now, but I just first of all, validating what you're saying. I mean, I'm in the legal field, and there's no other field, I don't think, that AI is more anxious to replace than attorneys that you don't wanna hire or talk to anyways, right? So, we're seeing a ton of that, and it'll be interesting, there's a lot of ways that I think we're being marketed AI as if it works better than it does, but it's gonna get there. And it may be a short time frame or a long time frame, but it's gonna get there, and it's gonna absolutely shift the way that the lawyers and other, as you mentioned, white collar and blue collar eventually, people are doing their jobs. So it's an exciting time for sure.
Yeah, and I think also with lawyers, it's going to be more like solopreneur kind of things. Right now, they say, the people coming out of law school right now are going to have a tough time finding jobs because those entry level jobs are the ones that are being automated away, where it's all the document research and all that kind of stuff that you feed up the chain. And you can be one attorney and have, AIs scouring LexisNexis and these databases for you and creating all the documents. And then you're just sitting on top of writing all of that. And you don't need, I mean, we've already gotten rid of the law library, right? And the secretarial pool and all those other parts of a big law firm that used to be. I think that the next step is going to be these entry level jobs, and it'll be the attorneys that have the experience that'll be just using all these tools and not having to have a bunch of associates and lower level attorneys working for them
Yeah.
and eating into their profits.
Yep, it's all shifting into legal ops these days, so
Legal
it's
ops.
an exciting time. Well, tell us, you've had this experience with Food Century and other businesses, and you've kinda modified your approach. You said, "Hey, I'm gonna do something on my own." Uh, is was that first thing you did MBA ASAP, or was there another step to get to this point?
Well, I would say it basically MBA ASAP has evolved over time, and that's really where it started was writing. Well, basically, where it started was I was starting companies. I took two public. I ran them as a public CEO and CFO for 15 years.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also started teaching and started teaching finance. Basically, my sister was teaching in New Jersey at a university in the evenings. She was working as a financial person for a big company there, and I thought that's so cool. Teaching. I never thought about that. And so when I got back home, I started poking around and got myself a couple of teaching assignments and realized that. And when I got my MBA too, and realized these poor students, the textbooks are this thick, 800 pages on accounting and
I've
800
been there,
pages
I
on
totally
finance.
understand.
Right? Yeah, and it's like they're not gonna learn all this stuff, and they had no, context for it and prioritization, like valence of what's really important and what's not. It's from an academic standpoint, it's all intellectually fascinating, but on a day-to-day basis, I was thinking from my experience, what did I use? What were the fundamentals? What was the blocking and tackling of this subject? And started looking into that and started really, distilling this information down from these big textbooks into little PowerPoints, slide decks, and then into little white papers. And then from there into like book length things. And around that time, again, it was this convergence of technology. Kindle Direct Publishing came along, Amazon, and you could upload a Word document and they had a cover maker, and suddenly you had a book that you could sell worldwide. And they make a e-copy, the Kindle, and they also make a paperback that they do. It's called POD, print on demand. So you didn't have to anymore print 1,000 copies because somebody had to set up a printing press, and that would be where the break even point was. They print one anytime anybody orders it. So it was a really wonderful way to start making the books. And from the books, then I started just recording my classrooms, things on my whiteboard, lectures on my little smartphone and editing them on
It it almost
iMovie.
it almost sounds like, though, this wasn't intended to be a company, like, you're just was the idea to have it a
No,
company from the beginning, or was it just more like a passion project you were doing, and then
it was like you're right. It was like a passion project, and that's why I say, like doing something that I love doing, then it doesn't matter about being consistent and disciplined because I do it anyway. I just keep doing it, and but pretty early on, I thought I can make a company out of that because that's basically the way I think. It's like I can make a
right.
company out of this.
You've been doing
So
that for years and years and years, it's gonna
I've been
creep
doing it for
in.
years. I've been doing it way back since I was a kid, and then, definitely in my 20s and all, and, always. And, so it's like, I can, let's see. And then the tools were there to do it that way. And then a platform called Udemy came along, and I could just upload these videos and a couple of PDFs and stuff and have courses up there. And, and again, one of the lucky things was one of the first courses I put up, I was putting up, I was thinking people would be more interested in sexy subjects like strategy and marketing and, negotiations. And I put up corporate finance, and that became a hit for me. And I was like, people want to know about corporate finance. It seems like the driest, boringest subject, but it really filled a niche. And surprisingly enough, was one of the first ones I put up. So I had this early win. It's like, oh, well, I can do more of those, that kind of stuff. And so I kept putting up more and more stuff, and some of them, didn't do as well, certainly, but I just kept doing it, and because I knew that I could, because I had this sort of proof of concept. And from there, I went to I wanted to not be too beholden to anybody's platform. I did other ones too. There's a bunch of other platforms for do it Teachable and the other things, but I wanted to have my own. So I hired some developers and things and made MBA-ASAP.com a website and put a course on there, and, housing my own videos and also. If somebody changes the rules on me, I'm not, the rug pull isn't, they can't take away my intellectual property. Like a lot of people, I was hearing these cautionary tales about it was like having, you'd be on a platform and then the platform would change the rules and suddenly you had no business. And it was like somebody said it was like having the most lucrative McDonald's built on top of a volcano. It's like it wouldn't really work. So I wanted to have something that was more stable, that I could build intellectual property around and have it as a actual asset and property. So I did that, and that has been really fruitful. And just recently, one of the things that people wanted was accreditation. So through Florida Global University, I've got accreditation for my course. So at the end of the course, they take if they get 80% on the final exam, they get a certificate, with credits from Florida Global University, and and then from there, instead of just having a sort of one-way street where I'm talking and they're listening on us. I started a community. So there's all that peer-to-peer interaction, and I develop them over time. To each month we have a different subject that we take on, and we have mastermind each week and things like that. And that's been really fun too. And having not just where they're interacting with just me, but they can interact with each other and ask me a lot of questions, and I can respond. And so that's been a really great thing too. So those are the different aspects of it as it's grown. It's grown organically. Like you say, it started out as just sort of the artifact of my deciding to do some teaching, and then using my classroom as sort of a laboratory as far as what works, what sticks, and I could see when the light bulbs went off, and they say, "Oh, now I understand what, a balance sheet is," or they would just sort of start to glaze over and look at their watches and when's this course going to be over, so that helped me to try to make the material compelling, and also, interesting enough that they could actually, you know, get it. Cause that's really the key. I want people to know this stuff, know it like they know anything, anything else, and uh, and then be able to use it and be able to use it right away. And that's the ASAP part, just like not that we're going to take 2 years to go to college and spend a whole bunch of money, but maybe 6 weeks, and all of a sudden you have this information, and you can start using it to make your bakery or your auto mechanic shop hum a little bit better.
Yeah, that's very cool. So many small business owners need that, but they need the light version of it, you know? My wife went through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program and,
Well,
loved that, she called it her mini MBA, and, it's been, just something she's referred back to and I think drawn a lot of stuff from. So, a lot of people need this, whether it's, one format or another, they need access to this to help run their business better. I'm really curious, John, what did you take from your prior experience with larger businesses, bigger bets, you know, and pull into MBA ASAP as you were building it? What kind of decision making were you thinking about or leveraging from that earlier experience?
well, and decision making, I mean, that's such a key part of things. Well, every experience kind of cultivated me for the next thing. And but one of the things that I was always interested in, like I say, with decision making and sort of how do you approach the world, and sort of make a model out of what you're experiencing so that you can make good decisions and fast decisions. And Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's partner, always talked about having this lattice work of mental models, that you could, so the right tool for the right sort of, uh, job that you're encountering. And so I started to put together a bunch of, my thoughts on that. And that became another book too. I have a book on mental models, and, what are the, looking for things like the power principles, like what's the 20% that's going to bring 80% of the results and things like that. And try to really exploit as many different models as I could uh, to uh, to make better decisions and to make clear decisions. So, yeah, that's been a big, I think, a big takeaway. But everything. I mean, another thing that I've a lot of what I've done with MBA ASAP is sort of had my ideas on something and then want to codify them in some way for my own mind, and then from there make it into a product that I can share with everybody else. Negotiations. I mean, at the end of the day, everything is negotiations, right? Whether what movie we're going to see, where we're going to go to dinner, in your personal life, whatever those kind of things, to how you're going to assemble people to do things. And a lot of what I do now too is, I will, it's not just me. I hire some consultants from time to time and assemble a mosaic of talent that fits whatever you know, uh, job needs to be done, and then that goes apart and so you have to there's no more of this hierarchy where you say, "Do this, do that." Why? Because I told you to, because I'm your boss, and if you don't, I'll fire you, and then you won't be able to pay your mortgage, so you're really beholden to me, that kind of stuff. It's like you have to have leadership skills and negotiating skills to make people understand why it's a good idea to be part of this team and to do these kind of things and to do it in an effective manner. And so I put together all my stuff on negotiating and then put that as a course and a book and all those kind of things too. They say, and I really like this is, if you're not thinking enough, if you get stuck, if you're not thinking enough, read and just read like crazy. You should read like crazy anyway. I mean, that's a superpower, especially in this day and age where not too many people read. You can really get ahead that way. And if you're thinking too much, right, put those ideas down, get them out of your head, and get them on paper so you can clarify them up and make them into something meaningful for yourself, and then hopefully for others. So that's really my approach to these different kind of subjects. But I would say, yeah, decision making skills through having a good set of mental models, and then also cultivating negotiation skills. And negotiation is a learned thing. You can learn to be a better negotiator, and I think it's really valuable.
Well, I feel like as you're mentioning all of this, and maybe I'm wrong, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it really feels like you've gone from, bigger businesses to, "Hey, I need to, you know, alleviate some of the maybe pressures or the, drama." I keep going back to drama, that's a word I use a lot. Of dealing with other people, you start to write, you start to teach, you start to share your expertise, and then you're like, "Wait a second, maybe I can monetize this." But it really does seem like all of this is kinda leading up towards, maybe a legacy moment. Are you doing part of this as leaving a legacy, for those that, you're connected to, those that, uh, show up at your classes? What's driving you at this point for MBA ASAP?
And that's a great question, Jeff, and it has been that way. I that's what I wanted to do as I've gone through life is, I wanted to alleviate frictions and stresses and drama and all those kind of things that were not productive parts of, trying to be productive. And that's really what I've really tried to think about and to strip back until I got to this place. Now, sometimes people ask me, "Oh, are you retired?" and stuff. I said, "Well, I'm kinda retired, but I just do this." And one of the reasons I love it too is because I get all this data feedback, it's like kinda gamified. There's this a gamification element. It's like, "Oh, I sold that many books today," or, "Oh, I sold that amount of courses," or, "Oh, this happened or that happened." There's these metrics that then excite me and give me those little shots of dopamine, I guess, that keep me going in that way. Um, but yeah, I, like I say, I write. I think it's all part of a legacy, and I like that idea. All these things are artifacts that I'm going to leave behind, and I like that idea. Um, I've written a lot. I've just published today, actually, my 71st book. 71 books. It's a lot of books, and this last book that I published was the third book of a trilogy on Benedict Arnold, the famous American trader. And people don't realize that he was a real hero of the revolution before he became a traitor. And so I take that through that in a trilogy form, and And so that's more of a literary historical fiction, and it brings up philosophical points and points about government and ethics and morality, all kinds of things that I wanted to wrestle with, and do it in this dramatic thing. And I started doing that, 15 years ago. When I read um, Ron Chernow's book, Alexander Hamilton. When I read that, I started to write a play about this stuff. And interesting enough, like a year later, that Hamilton play came out. I was like, oh, I think he had the same idea, but he did a much better job and he put it together. And it's taken me this long of had to rattle around to say, you know what, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write this in a novelistic form with a larger overarching narrative and stuff. So I write a lot of things like that too. I write some histories. I write histories of technology, histories of all kinds of things, biographies, books on music. I'm a musician, so yeah, I think in a way, uh, and I do think about that sometimes. I'm like, it'd be neat if these things somehow survive me, and maybe like a great great grandkid of mine or something will one day say, "What did that guy have to think about?" And there's my ideas that somebody could access. That would be just really, really cool to me, you know? So yeah, I am doing it as a legacy, and, it's almost like a snowstorm, where it's just flake on flake, these things kinda build up to some sort of a mass, and in each instance, I try to do something that I'm just really compelled and interested in at that moment because I can't force myself to do it. It has to be something that, like I say, the pull has to be enough to pull me through the process. So, and a lot of times it'll be just a little idea that I have that I start to follow, and all of a sudden, little by little, it builds up. Sometimes I abandon it for a while, like that Benedict Arnold idea for 15 years, but then I come back around to it, and say, wait a minute, this is kind of interesting. So yeah, so it's all a piece with creating a legacy and thinking of it in those terms and bringing that type of responsibility, I think, to the future or whatever, to my work to sort of not make it too haphazard and not too sort of knock it out fast or something, but at the same time, professionals ship, they deliver. So at some point, perfectionism can be procrastination. So I don't wait too long to polish stuff, so and that's that balance between, how does an abstract artist know when the painting's done?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Well, you've certainly shipped your fair amount, maybe more than your fair amount. 71 books. I That's gotta be, it's gotta be up there in the, top percentile of how many books anybody's publishing. That's pretty amazing and probably a subject for a whole other, podcast episode maybe. So, but I'm curious, of all these things you've done, you know, big companies, solopreneur, writing books, thinking about legacy, teaching, what is it that you would leave with somebody, a CEO who's maybe at a point that you saw or were at in your earlier career, and they're like, "Man, I'm trying to build this business, whether it's with a team or not, and they're struggling with some of these strategic high level decisions, trying to break through their own, obstacles in their path." What's that nugget of advice that you would say, "Hey, listen, this might or might not work, but this is what I would do. This is where I would turn in that type of situation."
That's a great question, Jeff. I think, we talked about perseverance, and persistence and don't give up. Just don't give up. When you're doing something, you know, and don't question it too much, have a bias towards action. I like instead of ready, aim, fire, ready, fire, aim, where we actually you plan a little bit, do something, and then see what type of, feedback you get, measure that feedback, and then, uh, course correct accordingly or what you have to do. So you have some real you're actually interacting with the real world and not just getting lost in, your own mind and not letting that battle plan confront the enemy or taking that punch in the face when you have your plan kind of thing. Really have a bias towards action in that way. And then really the thing comes down to sure obstacles and perseverance and trying to break through. That's absolutely a thing. But there's also this thing in entrepreneurship they talk about a lot in all businesses, pivot or persevere. Sometimes the wall is really a brick wall and you can't go through the wall. So you have to figure out how to pivot, how to do something a little bit different and that's where the art really lies and the judgment really lies. And you have to trust your judgment is I've persevered. I've tried to, make this obstacle, whittle it down and figure out how I can get through it, but I'm just not making it. Is it time to pivot and go around it or to try something, little, or what else has come out of this as a little artifact? There's so many businesses where they say that, oh, we were on this path and we did this and we made this little tool for the team to communicate. And this business didn't work, but the little tool that we did for you know, that became Slack or something, it's like, oh, so there's lots of things that you can learn if you're just willing to not just focus on the thing you want it to be, but what are the other things too? And and listen to customers, it's not what you build and then they're going to come. It's like, what do people want? What kind of either pain point can you alleviate or what kind of delight can you create? Those are really the two things you can ask. And, and find out what people really want and then do that.
No, I appreciate that. I think we might have to extract a few different nuggets out of that last statement there. But you're right, persistence, perseverance, and pivot are all they're just foundational issues in entrepreneurship, right? And maybe knowing and that's maybe what this podcast is really meant to be. It's, know when to make the decisions to try to do those different things. And I don't know that there's an absolute right answer one way or the other for any situation, but knowing that the options are there to do those and uh, how to smartly try to attempt them and test them out and see if you can do it. I think that's the best we can do. Uh, and sometimes you're going to find success. Many times, maybe not, but some of these things are going to lead to success. So you've clearly
Well,
experienced some of that. Go ahead.
oh, no, I'm sorry, but I was just gonna say, like, the longer you're in the arena, the more chances for success you have. You've increased your luck surface basically, 'cause, I heard a quote recently, "Time is luck." And if you're in it long enough 'cause, let's face it's never our own efforts totally that make us successful or failure. It has to be timing. It has to be a aspect of luck, and that's what Napoleon always asked of when they were going to when people were recommending a new elevate somebody to one of his generals. He didn't ask if they how good were they strategically in their military. He said, are they lucky? And that was the thing he wanted to know. That they have a penchant for luck, and the way that we can increase our luck is just by being in the game relentlessly.
Yeah. And you called it luck surface area, I think is I heard. I like that.
Yeah, increase your surface. Yeah, right. Where if you increase the luck surface area, basically, your where opportunities can fall. That if you can recognize them, boom, that might be the thing to do. And yeah, so time is one of those things that increases that luck surface area for sure.
I love it. Well, John, you've left us with a bunch of insights, and I know it's just a small slice of all of your expertise and experience. So I appreciate you sharing that with the audience today. It's been great having you on the show.
Thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks for doing this because you're really you're bringing this to a big audience that can then be inspired by all your different guests and your own great insights. And I started out in the television business, and back then it was 3 networks in the United States, and it was all just all transmission. And now through a podcast, you can have an international audience. It's just amazing. So we're living in some wonderful times, and kudos to you for doing it.
Lots of opportunities. I'm glad to be a small part of it myself. So, and
It's great.
also thanks to our audience for joining us again on the Breakout CEO. It's great to have you. You guys help us make the show what it is, and you guys help us to get John's insights out there even further. Help to build his legacy and build your own businesses. So, and we will see you all again next time. Be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you enjoy the show, a rating or a review goes a long way. Our mission is to promote the stories of breakout CEOs in scaling SaaS, e-commerce, and tech companies to equip peer CEOs with valuable perspectives and confidence. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of The Breakout CEO. I'm Jeff Holman, and I'll see you next time.